Hey everybody, welcome to the Office 365 Pulse. It's great to be here. We have all four of us here this week, so that's very nice. We have somewhere around 60 to 70. We're unsure of the exact number updates this week. So Adam, since you haven't been able to join us for a while, why don't you kick us off and let us know about some of the things that are in development that you are excited about?
Sure, I'll just take one for now so we can share the love. We've seen a lot of this recently of Microsoft doing a whole bunch of updates around compliance and Defender and stuff like that, which is great. But one of the things that's actually come up quite a bit for partners that I'm actually working with recently is Endpoint DLP, and they have a new update coming out to the Compliance Center where they'll have advanced classification, scanning, and protection for Endpoint DLP. Now, this is scheduled for March of this year, but what that actually means is essentially it's going to allow Microsoft 365 cloud-based data classification to scan items and classify them and return results back to the endpoint device. So if you haven't done this before, it basically allows you to extend the type of classified sensitive information types and scanning that you'd normally associate with DLP down to your actual like Windows desktops and things like that. So in the same way that you could go through and say, okay, I want to go through and look for credit card data, or I want to go through and look for electronic healthcare data and make sure it's not leaving my cloud-based system, Endpoint DLP allows you to do that on, I want to look for credit card data that are sitting on files on my users' Windows 10 machines. And this new update is basically going to bring more advanced and further classification settings to actually go out to those endpoints and be there. So happy to see it. It's cool functionality. This is something that's going to be big and important for anyone that has compliance needs out there. In the same way that right now, almost every company that we work with is going through and setting up DLP and setting up that type of classification. As this becomes more streamlined, you'll see more and more people buying into the licensing for Endpoint DLP, and they'll be doing the same functionalities on their actual machines instead of on the perimeter of just their cloud services, which is cool. That was nerdy.
Yeah, you were getting your nerd on there.
How about you, Tamara?
Well, Forms is getting some love this week in development. So the portal page experience is getting improved. Microsoft Forms will not only surface its portal page on the Office Hub, but will also reroute partial traffic to forms.office.com and forms.microsoft.com. Then the user will be able to find collections on the portal page with some other minor improvements. Then also in Forms, enable templates for commercial users. So Microsoft Forms will not only surface its portals page on those locations that we talked about, but then the user will be able to use Forms to easily find and explore high quality first party templates on the portal page through different business categories like build better events, grow product success, improve employee satisfaction. I don't know that you're going to improve employee satisfaction with a form, but if you can do it, I suggest you do. And then also brand new first run experiences from Forms new users. So for those new to Form users, Microsoft is going to help you understand through branded new first touch experience about the Forms capabilities, where they can use Forms and how. Users can navigate through the Forms templates categories through several selected business scenarios and then pre-populated grab and go solutions. So they're kind of getting you started on the ground running with this click through.
This is very cool. Very cool. Tom, what do you love?
So there's a couple things that stood out for me. Nothing that was like overwhelming. Oh my gosh, my world has changed. However, OneDrive Sync Activity Center visual updates. So the Sync Activity Center, when you're running it on your machine, has always been just a little, thing in the corner, lower right-hand side. It never really stands out. It seems like it could get a lot more love. Well, they're now receiving a visual update to more align with the Fluent design language. This visual update applies a modern look to the Activity Center. Hopefully, it'll make it a little bit easier to see what's going on, give you a little bit more capability, because right now it seems to be just very much bare bones. But keep an eye open for that. That should be out this month, coming to GCC worldwide, GCC High, and DoD. One other thing that I'm seeing is that Power BI emissions impact dashboard for Microsoft 365. So there's a Power BI template that Microsoft is now going to make available in June of 2022. Don't get your hopes up right away, but it allows Microsoft 365 admins to view the greenhouse gas emissions associated with their organization's usage of Microsoft 365 applications. The dashboard is available in preview and includes emissions associated with Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams. So I know that Microsoft is pushing really hard to become either carbon neutral or carbon negative within their organization. This, I'm assuming, is saying, okay, if you're using this much Teams and these many resources in SharePoint Online, that equates to us having to power it up at this level, which produces these many emissions. And they can go through and say, okay, here's what your company is putting out in terms of greenhouse gas emissions in order to run this software. I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference for anybody, but if that's something your company is really focused on, that's going to be.
You guys can tell you guys don't live in California and you guys don't live in a state where that stuff might matter or where there's rules and regulations around it. So
they'll tell you how many chipmunks died in the producing of your SharePoint document libraries.
Oh, goodness, you guys, goodness. You know, but think about companies that are going to go get LEED certifications or are going to go 100%. Get all of these different things. These are numbers that they've not been able to include before. Okay. Or I went from cutting down my footprint and I went from powering it here to now going to Office 365. What a drastic change they could make.
No, it's a good change, and it's cool that they're making it so that you can actually see it. And I definitely see the need, especially for companies, and let's be real, for the younger generation that I am a part of that is starting to become in more prominent positions in business. This is stuff that actually is genuinely important to people. So cool from Microsoft's side to go through and make it available to see. And as Jen said, I'm willing to bet going to the cloud reduces almost everyone's carbon fingerprint because you're almost always overutilized and in less efficient solutions from there. So cool for them to do it. But I'm still going to laugh about it and talk about dead chipmunks.
Yeah, I hadn't thought from the thing of, LEED certification and stuff like that. That makes a lot more sense thinking of it in that realm there.
What were you interested in, Jen? I still have one nerdy one, but I'm sure you have a couple things.
I don't really have that much. Power Query is going to get data from the current workbook. You're going to be able to refresh and some queries in Excel, some task pane, like a task pane for queries. And so some things there. Other than that, I didn't really have a whole lot that I loved.
I'm surprised neither of you mentioned Visio web app in Microsoft 365 for GCC, GCC,
I thought for sure Tamara was going to mention that.
Yeah, April 2022.
I feel like we've mentioned it before, but maybe I just missed it.
We talked about Visio a lot, but I don't know if we've done that specific feature. So I have one more nerdy one I can mention. So I don't know how applicable this is in the grand scheme, but it's still a cool feature. So if you're not aware, Microsoft has this cool thing called Office Cloud Policy or the Office Cloud Policy Service. The idea behind it is as part of 365, you get the Office suite. But whether or not you're actually fully managing the endpoint that's on has ramifications as far as typically what you do. So this policy is Microsoft's solution to maybe I'm not doing full control of the endpoint for my users, but I still want to imprint some, settings and stuff like that to the Office suite itself. How they do that right now is through the Office policy system. Well, that is actually coming to the government clouds. It was announced as in development for the first time this week. It's listed for April of this coming year. And so the ability to go through and do security settings and stuff to the Office suite without fully having to manage the endpoint is a nice feature. It's something that I have had multiple clients to go through and use. But in this particular case, I don't know of any customer who's had to go to the government cloud, specifically to GCC High, that doesn't have compliance regulations that would be way stricter than this anyways. Almost every customer that I work with that's going to be in the government cloud, specifically in GCC High, like, you damn well better be controlling the endpoint that stuff is on, because there's about 1,000 security things that you need to do, such as like BitLocker encryption and, specific requirements around the password and what people can and can't do from their endpoint. So still cool that it's coming there. It's a cool feature that I've seen utilized in commercial quite a bit. That's now going to be coming to the government suite. So more power to them. I'm always liking to see features that I've used that I think of add value in commercial go to the government side. But for most government customers, I don't necessarily see them using this just because they're going to already be much further than this in the compliance and security game.
Two things that I wanted to point out before we move away from in development is big for the DoD environment, and that's disable and enable all attendees' videos and disable or enable a single attendee's videos. This just came up in a conversation today, and it's why people are going to live events, even with a small number of people, because then the attendees can't share their video. Which is, if you're recording, anyone who is sharing their video shows up. And I actually had a person who went back and reviewed a recording. Turns out she had her webcam on. She was the organizer, but it was a muckety muck doing the briefing. And she said, I was so glad I was not multitasking and actually nodded once in a while in the recording. So just that's coming to DoD in April, along with a bunch of changes to meetings and managing meetings for the Department of Defense. So, but that's all I had for in development.
Me too. Anyone else?
I'm good.
All right, well, we'll go to rolling out. There's not a ton here, so I'm going to let Tom go first.
Yay, thank you. I'm going to clip down to the bottom of our list. There are two of the ones that have kind of hit me. Actually, I talked about them in an internal meeting this week. One is the chat density in Microsoft Teams. So you're going to be able to customize the number of chat messages that you see on this on the screen. So in your settings, you've got what they are now calling the comfy mode, which I love that term, which is what you currently see with lots of white space and the whole bit. And then you have your compact mode, which tends to be thinner. Everything's left justified, straight line across, and it allows you to get just about 50% more chat on the screen. This is really great if you don't want to do a lot of scrolling. The only thing I found on this that kind of irritates me is that the timestamp, which in comfy mode is sitting right there so you can see exactly when these chats hit, the chat doesn't appear in compact mode until you hover over that specific message, and it's over on the far right-hand side of the screen. My attitude is, it's all a single line. Why don't you just put the time over the far right-hand side instead of forcing somebody to hover over it and show it where it should actually be showing up by default anyway? Other than that, it takes a little getting used to, but not bad. The other one underneath that we all kind of laughed about is that Microsoft Teams new fluent emoji style coming to Teams emoji and reaction. So for all the things you want to have fixed in your system, they may not be out there yet, but you're going to get fluent style emojis with shading and have a more vibrant and expressive emoji experience.
I wasn't going to make fun of that one this week because I already talked about killing chipmunks. I figured my comedy routine was met, but I appreciate you mentioning it, Tom.
Hey, you betcha. You should have been last week when I talked about the whole font selector thing. That was hysterical.
That was the typographical experience I never knew I needed.
That everybody's been waiting for.
That was great. That was great. All right, Tamara, what do you love there in rolling out?
Microsoft Teams. Oh, I am so happy about this. Local time added to people profile.
That's going to be
so
cool.
We're talking to each other, and we're trying to set up meetings in the meeting so we can have another meeting about the meeting that we're currently in. And we're like, can you meet at 2? Yes. Oh, wait a minute. You're Pacific. So having that available on the people profile cards makes me very happy. I do wish that the people profile cards were also available in meetings. So like if you hovered over a person's icon or picture, their profile card would pop up. So you could get like their email address. You could get their phone number.
LinkedIn
Things like
profile, stuff like that, yeah.
But we do have new fluent emojis.
Fluent emojis were probably easier to fix. We act like, oh, they're not fixing the other things. I mean, we get so many other things.
True.
Give them a break, guys. Give them a break. We're getting lots of things.
The only other thing that I wanted to talk about was an Outlook, and that's view and navigate the organization chart, which I think is great. So this Org Explorer for Outlook helps you visualize and explore your company's internal structure, work teams, and individual roles. Here's what they don't tell you. You have to have that data. And that data has to be right. And I don't know about you, but I have never gone to an organization where everything in Active Directory is right, or is clean, or even has the managers populated.
Actually, in our case, the organization I work for, it is clean, it is populated, and it's correct. Surprisingly. One
company. All right.
Do you want to do anything, Jen? There's actually a couple that I think are interesting that I can talk about. So if there's anything you're interested in, you go ahead and go first.
Microsoft Teams, you can pin chat messages. So pinning will help your team stay in sync with what's relevant and in a timely manner. I just wanted to do that last week, and that has not hit our stuff yet. So I was like, man, I wish I could pin this chat so I could tell people to stop doing this.
Yeah, actually, it has hit our tenant. I wish you could do more than just one message, though.
Oh.
Just edit your message and make it bigger.
You say, hey, I want to pin this message. It pins it up at the top with like the one line or as much as it can fit in the one line. But then if you go to pin a second one, it comes up and says, oh, would you like to replace the existing pin message with this one? So you only have one at a shot, and then you can unpin it if you want to. But I do like the idea of being able to have a single chat message up at the top if you want somebody to see what's going on.
I like Jen's idea. Just make that single chat a laundry list.
Takes up the whole page. You can't actually
really
see your regular Teams chat, just the pin message.
Yeah.
I must admit, I've had to rethink my example in a case like that. It's like, so you may want to pin a message up at the top of the screen that says, hey, there's donuts in the break room. Oh, God, we don't have break rooms anymore. Never mind.
I always think it's so, like, legitimately for me, an example, I laughed when Jen said, like, oh, I want to tell people to stop doing that. I thought of, so one of the things Planet does, we have an internal training style course that we do that we call the ETC. It's like the East, I even forget what it stands for, East Training Collaboration or something. But it's basically where we will have people that have either done something cool that's new in technology that they want to share with other people, or we even have stuff like last week they did one on the soft skill of how people manage conflict resolution, and having a better understanding of how people tend to approach conflict resolution will probably set you up more success both in your personal life but also working with clients. Whenever there's one of those that I know that's coming up that I think is a skill that will really benefit my team, I try to remind them of it. Having the ability to just pin it at the top, like reminder, this is happening on the ETC, everyone try to join. Super cool feature.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Yammer support for EU members to be invited to external networks hosted in the US. So that's rolling out. So if that's something that you were waiting for, that's something that you are excited about. So there we go there. So those are the ones I had. So then I'll pass it back to Adam.
Yeah, I have two. They'll both be super quick. So one, I just like this setting, but it's coming out for users in GCC. The team setting of only invited users can join directly from the lobby. So the idea that, I'm sure everyone's experienced at this point, you're joining in with a new organizations thing and you sit in the lobby, does someone let you in, or sometimes you're just already in the meeting. There's a setting now that if people have not been invited directly to the meeting, they'll sit in the lobby, but the people you have invited directly can go there. But so if you think about it, the idea, say maybe I'm putting together a presentation and Tom and Jen are helping me on the presentation, I can invite them directly. We could get into the meeting early, but not let everyone who's coming to the presentation be there. Super cool feature, especially when you think about working remotely in the way that a lot of us are doing now. I could see some real benefits from there. And then the other one, this is actually just kind of like a good guy Microsoft thing. So primarily the one that I thought was cool, but for both, dynamic emergency calling for people that are doing Teams, VDI, and the Azure Virtual Desktop. That's also going to be for people that are doing VDI through Citrix. But the idea is basically if you are using a virtual desktop environment, and you are using Teams calling as your primary function, which is what I do. I do not have a normal phone for work. I use Teams to do it. Well, if you have an emergency and you call 911, normally how that would work is it would realize, okay, you're calling from this phone tower, and it's going to go through and connect you. Yeah, but so when you're doing it online, that obviously could potentially be a problem. So Microsoft has thought of this and realizes that there are people like me now that like literally their phone is something that's set up through Teams. So you can actually go in there and set up your location and where you are and what your address is. So if you go up there and you use the emergency calling features, it will actually transmit that information wherever you're calling. So even in the scenario, say like, like I have, friends that have like young kids at home. Say one of them had a problem and their kid went and called 911 from their computer. It would automatically upload where their address was, what their location was, stuff like that. Which again, like I don't know if I would have ever thought of that if I was the person going through and implementing this. So the fact that they are doing that is just cool. It's something that definitely needs to be done in the modern workplace. And the fact that again they're going through and doing these developments, good guy Microsoft.
Awesome. Well, cool. Let's move out to launch. So Tamara, why don't you start us with launched?
I've got one thing that makes me very happy. Outlook, find time availability for GCC. It just streamlines setting up meetings so much, and I love this feature in the commercial area. So sharing it with our friends in GCC makes me very happy.
Yes. And if it comes to GCC, maybe it will go to others. So there we go. I like that. So, okay, Tom, how about you?
I didn't really have anything highlighted on here, but I'll go ahead and mention a couple entries they have out there for SharePoint Syntax. One is pre-built models for invoices and receipts. So for being able to analyze and extract that structured information from sales invoices or receipts using pre-built models, you're now going to have those out there so you can start working with those instead of having to completely build it from scratch. And then there's provided document card view for applied syntax document understanding models. So a new library view setting to display extracted model information in a title view. So again, if you're into syntax, this may be something you've been looking for. You should have it now because it was launched and hopefully was released in January.
I've got one, OneDrive limit, OneDrive access and sharing to specified users. So in your tenant, the ability to say specified users access to OneDrive in your tenant. So instead of saying we can share everything, it's, only specified users. So just another level of control there to lock things down. So that's another one. And then I think that's really all I had. So the rest of them might be in the Adam category. So Adam, close us out for launch.
So I'm only going to answer two, I think, that I thought were cool. One of them's not even that nerdy. I just actually like it. And it's something that I don't use, so I don't organize enough. But Find Time coming for availability to GCC. All the AMs we work with use Find Time. I'm sure if you guys have ever had someone schedule a meeting with it, it's great. It basically sends out options and allows people to vote on when a meeting would be. So I'm not organized enough to do that, but it's great. And so people that are in GCC High, if you haven't used it before, it's a wonderful scheduling tool. So yay for you, or GCC, not GCC High. And then the one that I did want to mention that I thought was kind of cool, Microsoft 365 Compliance Center Information Governance Adaptive Retention Policies. So this is something I've tried to implement before with multiple customers before this was actually a thing. The idea of adaptive retention policies is basically maybe you don't want one retention policy that's the same for every single user in your organization. This is something I found often when I work with partners to go through and implement this, to be like, oh, well, we are contractually obligated to keep all of our contracts for 12 years, but we have it written inside of our policy that we're supposed to keep all of our documents for 7 years, and then we're supposed to keep all of our emails for 3 years. And so like you could write a retention policy that said how long you wanted to keep everything in your organization. And then besides that, you're doing retention tags and trying to deploy them off. It was kind of micromanaging and a lot of work. You could only set that one bulk overall retention policy. Well, now with adaptive retention policies, you can basically set differing retention policies for different people or groups in your organization. So say in the instance of the client I work with, oh, you're required to keep contracts for a certain amount of time. You could go through and have a group that was scoped to the people that worked with contracts and said, all right, the documents they're working on and the stuff in their OneDrive, the stuff in their SharePoint has a retention policy of 12 years, but the other stuff has a policy of 7. And not have to do it with tags and the manual work like you had to do before, but do it with these overarching policies. And again, in an adaptive way and not a one-size-fits-all way. I've almost every customer I've worked with that has actually truly gone through the governance exercise of what do we need to do for retention policy. It's normally not keep everything for 7 years. It's normally a nuanced conversation, and adaptive retention policies will bring real value there because of that.
Awesome. Well, moving on to canceled, there are some interesting ones here, and there's quite a few. So the first one is Microsoft Defender for Office 365 auto remediation with enhanced playbooks. This one is being removed and may be republished in the future. This was where they were going to auto remediate threats and give you additional playbooks with deep integration. And they're pulling that back, probably because that's a loaded one anyway. What does that really mean? So they're pulling that one back. We'll see what comes with that one. The next one, though, I think is interesting because it doesn't say why it's canceled. It doesn't say if it's coming back. It just says it's canceled. So maybe Adam can shed some light on this one. But this is Microsoft Intune, the management of user-installed apps on iOS. So this was the feature where Intune can assume the management of previously installed applications on iOS without requiring users to delete and basically reinstall those apps. And so the apps could have been distributed using a different MDM, or they could be user installed apps. So that would basically mean if I have an iPhone and I put it in Intune management and I had an app on it and my organization wants to manage it, Intune could come and say, that's a corporate managed app. I'm now managing your app. And so Intune was going to be able to, without having to uninstall or make any changes, they were going to be able to take over that app because I, linked up to Intune. Well, that feature is just gone now. It's canceled, but they don't say anything about it's coming back or it's being redefined.
I'm
or
guessing they had problems with the actual technical implementation of that when you go through and think about it. It's a slippery slope when you start going through and looking at stuff. So when people enroll in an MDM, they get this super scary message that says they can delete whatever the hell they want. Be careful who you're giving this to. And everyone always freaks out. When you're extending that out to application management as well too, Jen is completely correct. Normally how it works is I can go in and say, all right, I'm going to push out Teams, I'm going to push out Outlook, and I'm going to push out OneDrive and manage that content. But you technically have the ability, there's no reason I couldn't say I'm going to push out the Domino's delivery app and manage that on my users' phones too. So if people have a situation, as Jen was saying, where they already have an app installed, I'm sure it's a slippery slope as far as permission and ownership over if you actually have the ability to take it over. And if users registering in an MDM grants that authority, I would imagine, and this is a guess on my part, but I would imagine app makers specifically would have a real problem with people going through and taking over stuff that they've theoretically been granted control over from your users. Because if I go in and download an app from, I don't know, like I go in and download an app from like Mario Kart from Nintendo that I'm playing Mario Kart on my phone, part of the agreement for me to play that app is in-user license agreements that I'm saying I'm giving them their data to do with and protect. If then suddenly that's taken over by my company, I'm sure the company that hosted that app has legal questions about, like, was that granted over? Did the user then technically agree to what you're saying they needed to agree to now that's managed from somewhere else? I would think that was a limitation here, is that was something that couldn't be worked out. And maybe it'll come in the future. I would think I completely get it from Microsoft's side. In an ideal world, if I as a company want to manage app X and it's already installed on the user's phone, it's a shitty user experience if you delete everything and start fresh. It'd be much better if you could take it over. But I think that's a super slippery slope from a consent and legality standpoint. So that would be my guess.
New iPhones for everyone.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, basically, right? Here's your corporate device that I bought, so you're going to do whatever the hell I say.
All right. So then also semantic search for Microsoft Search. That is getting removed and republished with an update in the future. Exchange, customized message expiration timeout interval for Exchange Online. An update is going to get published in the future. It's being removed as they redefine the timeline. Microsoft Defender for Identity, new detection of the golden ticket using AES encryption. That's being canceled and may be revisited in the future.
I want a golden ticket.
Microsoft Teams, prompt to set meeting options for large meetings in Outlook for Windows for DoD. So this feature is being postponed and will be republished as soon as the timeline is defined. So this is where if a user is creating a large meeting, it automatically pops up and says, hey, do you want to change the meeting settings? That is getting removed from the roadmap for DoD. So I'm guessing there's a compliance issue or something like that, that they don't want people to change the default settings. And then Microsoft Project, allow Microsoft 365 users to provide progress updates on their assigned task. It's being removed from the roadmap as we make changes to the feature based on feedback, and a new roadmap item will be published when appropriate. So that's interesting. That was the feature where anyone who had an Office 365 license could update their Microsoft Project tasks, even if they weren't a project user. So you could, your project managers could have projects, but your task workers could just go update their task. Judging by this, it makes a ton of sense. But judging by this, it sounds like maybe they missed the mark on the first pass through. And instead of just leaving it in a development stage forever, they're going to pull it back and say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and make some changes. So I think they'll bring it back once they update some different features or something like that. So they're going to probably come about it a different way. So lots in the canceled area today. This is probably one of the largest sections we've had in canceled for a while. Some of them make you go, and others are just, okay, I expect that. So
for the record, as soon as Tamara said golden ticket, Tom immediately thought golden folder. I guarantee you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, too funny. Too funny. All right, y'all. It's been a fun week. We will be back next week for another show. So I think that's all we have this week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone.
I know.